Call Johann Lamont, 4 minutes.
Thank you very much, Deputy Presiding Officer. I think this is an interesting and important debate. There is a central issue for all of our children, their entitlement to live in safety and security, in a loving home, and to be nurtured. And I would want to say, first of all, that it's not simply in poor families that children are denied these things. And I would be concerned that some of the tone, the implication that it is poverty, means some of our children are denied a healthy and happy upbringing. I know in my own constituency there are families, despite the circumstances, the financial circumstances in which they find themselves, would teach us all a lesson about how to parent our children. As a parent myself, I often have grave anxieties about my capacity to find a safe place for my children to be reared. And I do think I am concerned at the implication this is something for them out there and not for all of us as society. And it is in that context, I think, that actually a financial incentive to marriage seems to be entirely irrelevant. It is about how we value our children and how we value families that is a concern. And I hear what Elizabeth Smith says about Ian Duncan Smith's Damascene's conversion in Easterhouse. He may have wished to reflect on it a little earlier in the 80s when people were telling him what was happening in communities across Scotland and beyond. It's not enough to create the impression that poverty is a plague on which there was no political decisions made. People live in difficulties because of active political decisions, and we have to reflect on those in terms of taking this forward. Now, on the question of lone parents, and the motion says that they regret that 1 in 4 children live in families where there is a lone parent. First of all, there are those who are widowed, who actively choose to spend the rest of their lives bringing up their children and focusing on their children. And I think it's a concern, it's implication that that is a wrong choice. Equally, for some, it is a courageous decision to leave, to protect your children, to come out of a marriage rather than to stay there, given particularly the financial implications for women of making that choice. And there is a dichotomy at the heart of this. When we talk about domestic abuse, how often have you heard the phrase, "Why does she not leave?" And then when she leaves, the implication is that she's creating problems for her children. And we have to recognise, in some circumstances, the problem for lone parents is the way in which we support them financially and give them economic opportunity, rather than the fact of it itself. And I can think in my own working life as a teacher, the number of occasions youngsters disturbed with the periodic reappearance of a father who caused mayhem in that home. And of one young boy in particular, when his father was at home, did not sleep in his own house for fear of what would happen to his mother, and as a consequence could not learn the next day. And it seems to me that glib suggestion is one that ought to be moved from by the Tories. If we wish to support families, we do need to address how inequality and disadvantage are experienced and how we can create economic opportunities, safe communities and safe families for people to thrive. We got information in a skills strategy yesterday which did not reflect that. An enterprise strategy now which has no responsibility for place or for people and does not address the inequality that often leaves women disproportionately as carers in low-paid jobs with no recognition of their needs. We don't have an education system. We need an education system. They need to talk about more than buildings and class sizes, but recognise that some of our children cannot even access education because of what's happening in their wider life. We need to understand the particular pressures on different kinds of families. Families of disabled children, it is a regret that the Scottish Government did not step up to the mark in addressing the transformational change it is required to support these families and siblings within these families to achieve their potential. In kinship care, yes, there is an issue about the benefit system, but there is a responsibility of the Scottish Government to address the huge diversity between what is offered to kinship carers in one part of the country and the other, and recognise that it is an issue of the rights of children as much as anything else. And
wind up, please.
On the issue of the voluntary sector, this SNP government needs to recognise the vulnerability of funding to the voluntary sector, which will have a consequence for families. There ought to be no sacred cows, nothing off limits, but a proper reflection of what's happening there in order that our families can be protected.
Adam Ingram, 5 minutes.